Hi everyone, my name is Michelle Steele and I'll be covering Chapter 11, Adaptive Leadership. And I'm very excited about this one. This is a topic that we've been talking about in many of my schools, so I feel like I got the lucky draw here. So let's look at who the players are. So the main players in adaptive leadership that I looked at are, the main guy is Ronald Heifetz, and some of his major works are in 2001, he kind of hooked up with Donald Lowry, and they wrote a paper called The Work of Leadership that was published in the Harvard Business Review. And then a year later, there came Marty Linsky. He wrote a book called Leadership on the Line, which is a book that I had on my bookshelf already. And I really like this one. It's an extension of the first article. They cover many of the same topics. This one just provides more examples. And then these two guys got together with a third guy, Alexander Graziosi, and they wrote The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, another book that I also have that I'm very excited about. And this book is really more, it kind of expands on the first two, and it includes lots of very practical, hands-on tips and tricks that you can use to deal with adaptive leadership. So let's look at what is adaptive leadership. Well, adaptive leadership by definition is the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and thrive, which to me sounds a lot, at this point, sounds a lot like most all of these theories that we've been talking about in our class so far. So what makes this unique? So in order to look at what is adaptive leadership, we need to kind of take back a few steps and look at, when do you use adaptive leadership? Like, what's it used for? And it's really used in the world of problems. And so one of the things is we encounter problems all the time, every day. I know my entire job for the last 18 years has been solving problems, right? People come to me, how do we get this to work? And then my job is solve a problem and get it put out there, right? So with these authors, though, they go into looking at problems from kind of a different point of view, and they look at problems as in two separate categories. So you look at problems as from technical problems, and then also looking at a different kind of problem, which is an adaptive challenge. Technical problems are usually our run-of-the-mill problems. These are those problems that are really easy to identify, easy to see a solution, and usually they're solvable with our existing resources. These are problems like a problem recently is like, how do I get my classroom on Zoom? Right? And so when teachers come to me with that, it's like, okay, so we're going to ask an expert and we're going to get a technical solution to that problem, right? We're going to have, our techie guys are going to give you a handout. They're going to give you something special that you can give to your students on how to get on Zoom. They maybe use some hands-on training. So when we have technical problems like this, they get technical solutions. They might look like a memo or a policy guide or procedures. And then usually when people get a technical solution to their technical problem, they usually walk away satisfied and happy. Oh, my internet works. Oh, I know how to get on Zoom now. So it's usually like a great resolution. However, when we look at adaptive challenges, it's a very different kind of challenge. These are those challenges that are really hard to identify. And they're the challenge that maybe not involve like having an answer to something, but it really requires a change in your behavior and a change in the way you do things, maybe even a change in your values and your beliefs. These adaptive challenges are a little bit more intertwined with lots of different areas, maybe at the same time. And with adaptive challenges, typically there's more learning involved. There's usually a period of some experimentation and trying things out and making progress. And then there's a time factor in that adaptive challenges don't have easy solutions that can be resolved right now. They're usually things that happen over time, maybe even over decades. So let's look at some examples. So our authors of these various writings, they provide lots of examples in their TED Talks and in their videos and in their books. So we'll look at one of theirs. And they look at problems from three different points of view, like what is the relationship to the problem solution, who's doing the work, and then what type of work. So if we look at a technical problem, let's use an example called someone broke their arm. If someone broke their arm, then that's a clear problem, right? It's clear their arm is broken, we need the arm repaired. So we go to an expert, a doctor, to have the arm, fixed and set and cast and everything, right? And then the intent is that someone else is going to fix this expert's going to be successful, and it's going to be done quickly. But what if we had something more of an adaptive problem? So let's look at an adaptive challenge here. Let's suppose that someone is recovering from a heart attack. So in one sense, there is a technical part of that, which is, he had a heart attack, he goes to the doctor, he gets his heart repaired, and then he goes home and everything's better now, right? Well, no, because we still have recovery from heart attack, right? So there's still this whole adaptive challenge nature that's left to be resolved, which is what does he need to change in his lifestyle in order to not have this happen again, right? So we look at, there's some learning involved. What does he need? What changes in diet do we need to make? What changes in exercise do we need to make? What changes in lifestyle do we need to make so that we can recover from this heart attack? And oftentimes it's not a singular experience. You usually get stakeholders involved. You have your families involved in what's happening with that student. I know right now my husband and I are in a diet, and it's so much easier when we're doing it together because we're eating together, eating the same meals, exercising together. So it makes it so much simpler when I have my stakeholders. And then if we look at, what type of work this is, this work is not about doing something and doing it quickly. It's about making progress. It's like trying things out, seeing how they improve, trying something else out, maybe taking a couple steps back if something doesn't work, but it's all about making progress. There's no like, now it's fixed. And then oftentimes in education, though, we don't have challenges that fit neatly into these two little categories. What we wind up with is something that's like a combination of those two, where it might have a technical aspect about it, but then there's also this adaptive piece that really needs to be resolved. So now one of the problems, though, is that we look at in schools that often happens is that we have all of these adaptive challenges. And then what happens is oftentimes leadership will look at, oh, here's this technical solution for this adaptive problem. And then we find that this really, really doesn't work and really isn't satisfying. So like one of the issues at one of my schools, we had an issue with tagging. And I know I went to the administration, I'm like, look, we really need to figure this stuff out. And, her solution was, I got it. I'm going to write a memo. We're going to have a policy. So she writes out this whole policy. We send it out to all the classrooms. She puts it into the student handbook and she's like, problem solved. And I'm like, yeah, not really. So with this particular problem, there's a lot more facets to that. It's more of an adaptive challenge because there's lots of things that need to happen besides just having a policy. Right. And so in retrospect, we wound up, having to get the security department involved, the plant manager involved, the teachers involved, create beautification projects on our campuses, work with students on how do we keep our school, looking beautiful. And so it did take some time to actually reduce the level of graffiti in the classroom. But it's often interesting how often in education, though, we encounter, let's write a policy, let's write a memo, and that will fix it. And it really doesn't. It may satisfy a few people for a very short amount of time, but in general, people are left dissatisfied. So what is adaptive leadership? So adaptive leadership is not an authority-driven thing. It's not this person in leadership is making decisions and letting people know what to do. That's not adaptive leadership. And I know sometimes we think like, oh, I'm an adaptive person, right? I know I have a really broad skill set. I can, adapt to situations. I can help lots of different people out and, figure out what there is to do and get in there and help. And that's not adaptive leadership either. Adaptive leadership is really a very specific thing. And according to our authors, it's somebody who's creating this space and creating this environment where people can come together and work on and solve these adaptive challenges. So it's not somebody who's telling what to do as much as it's someone who's creating a space for work to be done. So our authors, they actually provide a framework in all of their writings. They provide a framework for these strategies to help leaders and organizations work through these adaptive challenges. Our textbook, it had 6 of them in there. These other books, they have many more than that. I'm going to go through a few of them that I really thought were impactful to me. So their number one perspective is this notion of get on the balcony, get on the balcony, get off the dance floor. That, when we're on the dance floor and when we're in the thick of, being at our schools and the work that there is, we often can't see everything. We can't see the bigger picture. So they have this notion of get off the balcony so that you can start to see the bigger picture of what's happening on your school site, who's dancing with who's not dancing, what's happening. And so they have lots of strategies in their books on how to get you off the dance floor and into the balcony so that you can see. There's also adaptive leaders also need to spend some time identifying what these adaptive challenges are, that they're often multifaceted. There's lots of moving parts to these things. And you think you might know what it is, but then as soon as you start digging, there's like all sorts of stuff bubbling under the surface. Things that we often try to ignore, areas of that campus that we don't want to deal with that right now. Let's just let that simmer, right? So you really need to start to look at what are those things that we've been ignoring and what are all the different components of this challenge. And they have strategies in their book, again, to help distinguish those. Part of being an adaptive leader is definitely acting politically. I mean, this is my life. I work for a consortia, and so I have 5 different school districts that I work with, and then all the leadership from all those places. And I don't supervise any of those people. And so I find that a lot of my day is spent negotiating all of these different personalities and trying to get what we need done inside taking care of where everybody's at. So important thing for you as an adaptive leader is to know who all your players are, know where they are and how they feel about what we're talking about. Know who those people are that are your partners, know who those people are that are more the opposition, and figure out those ways that you can work with them. And it's not so much about, trying to negotiate your point of view and get what you want in. It's more like nurturing this network of leaders so that you can use them for, achieving, our adaptive challenges. Then here's my favorite. This is one of my favorite ones. This one, it's called Regulate Distress in our book, but in the other books, it's called Orchestrate Conflict. And I really like the idea of this orchestrate conflict because it creates this whole context around conflict that there's nothing wrong here. And I love that. This is the thing, is there's going to be conflicts. Whenever you're bringing people together and you're trying to resolve something, people are not always going to agree. And it's not a problem that there's conflict. Right. And so the idea of orchestrating conflict is to embrace that and to have it be heard and to really look at what's underneath the conflict. So oftentimes when people are showing resistance or negativity, it's because there's some deeply held belief that's underneath all that if we could just get that out and we could look at that maybe that would make a difference in the conversation. In the books they teach you how to regulate the temperature in your group, meaning how do you raise that temperature? What are those strategies to raise the temperature so you can draw these conflicts out and then turn the temperature down so that you can solve problems and take action. So I think it's a really interesting, just contextual way of thinking about it as well. And I thought it was really great when the authors are talking about, the conflict is that primary engine that drives creativity and drives innovation, because we don't learn when we're just hanging out with people that are just like us and just think like us. There's nothing new to learn there that we really learn when we encounter people where there are differences. The primary part of job of an adaptive leader, though, is this whole notion of giving work back to the people. That, we're natural problem solvers. We love problem solving. I'm addicted to problem solving, right? Anybody tells me anything, I instantly start thinking about how am I going to resolve that for them. And part of being an adaptive leader is that you can't do that. You got to keep putting it back to where it needs to be, right? It's just kind of like you can't solve adaptive problems for other people. Like none of y'all can help me lose weight. You might be able to give me a list of what I should eat and how I should exercise, but does that really make any difference to me actually losing weight? No, I got to get to what is it in my brain? What is it in me that gets in the way of following through and doing what it is I know to do, right? So if you look at adaptive leadership in that sense, the people gotta go their own path and they gotta figure this out. And oftentimes we like to resolve these issues for people, and they'll come to us and we'll give them something to do, and they'll go back and then they'll come back and like, I tried that and it didn't work. I tried it and it doesn't work. Nothing's gonna work here. And we really need to get away from taking that on and shouldering the adaptive work and giving it right back to them and going back to, so what can you try in your classroom? What would you like to try next in your classroom? So that you can, be more effective or, meet the needs of the students and for yourself, right? So they need to be in that inquiry and they need to be in that discovery mode and not just put the onus on leadership. So this one was really great too. Protect the leadership voices from down below. What I loved about this context is we instantly go, of course, of course. You know, I'm one of those people like, I'm going to make sure everybody gets to share. You know, I'm going to deal with the wallflower. I'm going to deal with the, you know, the introvert over there who hasn't talked yet. And I'm going to make sure that everybody gets to have a voice. But what I really liked about this is they're also asking you to make sure you look out for the other kinds of voices, that sometimes people have loud voices, or they have voices of dissent, or they're whistleblowers, or they're very excited about their idea, about some wild crazy idea. And sometimes those things get lost even though they're loud and everyone can hear them. That oftentimes we try to focus on the middle. We try to focus on the middle, like, let's all, what can we all agree on? Let's, you know, vote and let's figure out what we can agree on. And in those kinds of scenarios where we're trying to get everyone to work together, that sometimes the ones on the fringes get left out, even if they're loud. So protecting all voices and being heard is that responsibility of the adaptive leader. Now, I have barely scratched the surface of what's in these books. These books are amazing. I think that everyone should add these books to their library. Again, step-by-step stuff in here of how do you get on the balcony? What are questions you can ask yourself during certain situations? What are questions you can ask your team if these certain situations arrive? And they have a zillion situations in here and very prescriptive about things that you can do to move those adaptive challenge problem-solving sessions along. So I highly recommend those books. If we look at the case study, we have the case study I picked is Saving the Whales and the Seals, can't forget about those. This one was about a university organization that was all around volunteering, and the university subsidized these trips, and the students went on all these volunteering trips around saving whales and seals. But there was a budget cut and there was a switch in the funding, and no longer was the university providing funding to this organization. So this organization had to rethink its entire existence. Like now, instead of just being organizing volunteers to go, now they're having to deal with the fact that how do we make up $500,000 in funding that we don't have to send people? So what I thought were really great examples of adaptive leadership is that the leadership, the board members in this organization broke into some breakout groups, and they really wanted to hear the voices of the people who belong to this organization and the different members. And so that was their effort to get on the balcony and really be able to hear everybody, to look through what was happening in their situation, identifying what are those technical aspects that they can deal with, but what are those more adaptive issues of changing people's mindset away from I'm just a volunteer to now I have to raise funds to save the whales. And I really like the way they focused on creating that space, hearing all the voices, and then they even wrote comments in there about how they needed to be okay with conflict and how they needed to move through that conflict to get towards their goals. So I thought that this case study was actually a perfect example of adaptive leadership at work. In terms of my real world example, I just picked the thing that's most pressing right now in all of my districts, which is remote learning. And I know when this first thing happened, we were kind of hoping during that first week we were closed that this was going to end quickly and we're going to be right back to our normal way of teaching and there wouldn't be really a whole lot we had to do. But after a week, it became obvious that we're going to be down for a while. So that first month was so interesting because it was like tons of stuff was happening. As soon as they hit go time, it was like bam, 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 lots of action, lots of things going every which way. And I was being called in all sorts of different directions to work on stuff. And what I realized in looking at it from this perspective is that we were dealing with a lot of technical problems. We're dealing with how do you get computers in the hands of teachers? How do you get computers in the hands of students? What resources do teachers need? What are our new policies that we're going to create around attendance and record keeping? All of these things were very technical problems, which is why it was like, check, 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 check. And we felt really good about ourselves. And then you have now. Right now, we're hot in the face of the fact that there are actually a whole lot of adaptive challenges that haven't even been addressed in this problem-solving mode. And so, like, I have a friend of mine who teaches low-level ESL, and she was very excited about getting her computers and learning Zoom and getting all her resources together. Then she gets online, and there's 4 students in her 40-student class, and so there was a big deal about how trying to figure out how do we engage students in remote learning? How do we even assess that they're making progress in this model, right? How do we keep them moving every day when we don't see them anymore? How do we even work with non-native English speakers? She had level 1 ESL class. She can't even call them and tell them how to get on Zoom, right? And then how do we provide the support services? So right now, all of my districts are in this inquiry heavy, and this is the new charge now. Teachers are coming back. They're providing extra hours during the summer for teachers to come in and work together with each other, not on training anymore, right? Now it's on collaboration, and how do we address all of these adaptive challenges? This is very interesting what's happening currently. My problem of practice is increasing student transitions from adult education to post-secondary programs. So our goal is to get students, once they graduated from adult ed, to move on to the college or to a career tech ed program. Our purpose of doing that is really to change the life situations for families so that they can move into making a more of a livable wage. My program right now that I work in is a consortia. We have 5 K-12 school districts with adult ed programs. And then we have 9 community colleges. They're spread out among 26 major school sites and hundreds of branch locations throughout the community. So our goal right now with the problem of practice is to create a community of practice that's going to support the implementation of strategies that are going to be implemented to help move students from our program into the college. And the intent is not to have it be like, this is the program, but our intent is really to create a unique implementation that's going to fit each school site. The adaptive leadership practices that are at play right now is really, making sure that we create that space where we can bring all these different stakeholders from different areas and different, different reasons and different scenarios with where their schools are in relation to colleges and things, bringing all those people together and creating a space where everybody can create and learn, making sure that we have all of our stakeholders there. And then one of the things that I'm really interested in is creating this culture of experimentation that oftentimes when our districts are looking for us to get together, solve the problem, and get it out in the field as quick as possible. And I really want to spread the word that this is a process. This is about progress. This is not about a thing that's in place and check the box. This is about teachers playing with this and experimenting and improving and increasing that number slowly over time. And then I love the notion of getting on the balcony right now, because I have focus on some of the campuses that I've worked on. That's my expertise, and I have less expertise in areas where they have smaller schools that are more remote to colleges. So really right now, my learning curve for my team is like getting on the balcony, giving as much information as we can so we can create a program that works for everybody. So my resources that I have for you, I have some resources that I used recently when I was giving a presentation on adaptive and technical. And there's an easy handout right here. So if you're interested in sharing any of this information with your teachers or your faculty, there's an easy handout. And then the last video on the list right here is a really quick 7-minute video that's done bang, bang, bang. And it talks about technical problems and adaptive challenges and kind of sets people up for that conversation. So those are 2 great resources. This one in the middle, this 4-minute video, I thought was really great in that it captures what's in the book. So it captures all those different components of part of the book. And then these resources, these references, I highly recommend buying these 2 books and having them as part of your library. I think they're good resources for any teacher or any teacher leader to go back to over and over again. So that's that, and I'm looking forward to seeing your feedback and your questions in our discussion group. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.